Hey gang, you've got Jake here, and on today's episode of Ghostly Activities, I sit down to interview the Lovely Ladies of Morbidity, Gabi Fiore and Kim Douthit of the Ghoulish Tendencies podcast. Today, we'll talk about serial killer spirits and why they may or may not continue to haunt us today. So let's listen in. So tonight, gang, we have the Lovely Ladies of Morbidity, Kim and Gabi from the podcast Ghoulish Tendencies, It's Oh So Spooky. They're here tonight to talk about a subject. And before I drop the name of the subject, I just want to tease some things to pique your interest. Some of them are names. Actually, most of them are names. Yeah, all of them are names. But they include Bird, Gacy, Bender, Dahmer, Bundy, Rodriguez. I'm getting old. I don't have my glasses on.
I was like, but so far, these are all ones on my list, too. So
Holmes,
I'm impressed.
And Baumeister, a.k.a. Smart, a.k.a. Baumeister. Tonight, we're talking about serial killer spirits and why some haunt and some don't. So with that, Lovely Ladies of Morbidity, starting with Gabi, tell me a little something about yourself.
Hello. I don't know what to tell you about myself. I am fascinated by all things ghoulish, haunted. I love finding out ghost stories. And I love getting excited about them and bringing them to Kim so that she can debunk most of them. I live in Seattle. I'm originally from the Southern California area. I do lots of creative things. I am a makeup artist. I paint busts and have makeup. You have one. You have a
I know.
boy.
I have a lovely bust of hers.
Yes, you have my lovely bust. And I love to write and do creative things. So it's a fun time in this neck of my neighborhood.
Well, thank you for joining us. And
yeah.
Miss Kim,
Yes.
what you got to tell us, homie?
I am a paranormal investigator. That's how I first met Jake and Gabi. I worked at Spooked in Seattle doing their haunted tours as well as their murder tour. I created the murder tour as well as Tea and True Crime, where we talk about different crimes and or murders and or serial killers. It's a monthly thing that we do now. And when I'm not doing that, I'm usually researching something to do with murder or teaching children how to act
not to murder.
And how not to murder. Makes me sometimes want to murder, but I teach them how not to or how to get away with it.
And that's our future, everyone.
Yes.
You're welcome.
They'll be well trained.
Oh, yes. Mine are the best. Mine are the best trained because I teach them how to get away with it.
Yes. So guys, when it comes to serial killer spirits, let's just throw it out there. Not all of them haunt the locations where they might have killed. And just looking at this list of the names, there's only one of them, her buddy, that you can really say there might be some haunted activity associated with him directly.
With him directly, I'd say.
With him directly. So how come the serial killers don't necessarily stick around like the victims? We'll start with Gabi.
Well, I think a lot of the reasons why is because they might not have a physical attachment to the place necessarily, or maybe their personal trauma was not as intense as those who they murdered. So like residual hauntings might not be as prevalent. But it really is dependent on the location of where the killings happened, right? So like I think you said except for Herb, we can never pronounce it right. But like a lot of all those murders happened at his house. So that's why he hung out there. It's because it's his house. If it was like another location, and I'm sure we could always scully this too, that there's other people that have killed within their own homes and they haven't stuck around their own homes. Maybe they just didn't have an emotional attachment to their home. So it kind of depends on context.
Okay. Kim, what you got?
I mean, I would agree with what Gabi is saying. You have especially residual hauntings happening when something traumatic has happened, which plays more into what happened to the victim and less into what happened to the killer in most cases. I also think, and in fact, it's funny because I was talking about this with June earlier today about Billy Gohl, who I just got in the book on. I think it's really convenient when you experience certain paranormal activity to credit it to the biggest name that you can associate with a place, whether or not that is actually the source of the paranormal activity. So it's not to say that there is not something going on in some of these locations, but I think because we know this is where so-and-so was held for a while, or this is where so-and-so killed somebody, because we have an identity, we want to give our spirit an identity, whether or not it is an accurate identity, if that makes sense.
It does make perfect sense. Yes. So yeah, I've always thought that was interesting because we've seen the Ghost Adventures episode and stuff they've done at Fox Hollow Farm. And, you know, the swimming pool is notorious for its activity, but you're right. No one's ever said, "Hi, I'm Herb" or Brian.
That'd be awesome if you did.
It would.
Hi.
Yeah.
It'd make our job easier.
It would. Can I have your ecto DNA? Thank you very much.
I'm sure he'd be happy to give it to you.
Good point.
Yeah,
I didn't think
especially.
about that. I did not think about that till right now. Yeah, I'm just gonna yeah.
Residual, if you know
Residual. Yeah, but I mean, the weird thing is because when, in this case of Herb specifically, I mean, he was fleeing the house when spoiler alert, because this was 1996.
If you don't know
people,
this
it's
by
25
now,
years, right?
come on.
So when he shot himself in the head and ended it, he was not on the property, but that doesn't mean anything.
In Canada.
Yeah, I mean, ghosts. You know, ghosts go back to where they had some kind of attachment.
Back to their familiar areas. Yeah.
But the one other thing that I thought was really interesting, and that was with Gacy, because that was his house, and even though I think it was 33 people, he was convicted of 26. I think. Or was
he?
Scully me.
He was convicted of. It was 33 counts of murder.
Okay.
But then he had a couple additional, like, I think it was sodomy and sexual assault.
Oh, got it.
So some of the convictions weren't murder convictions.
Okay.
They were.
But it was like 26 victims. Yeah, plenty of horror. But it was like 26, I think. Murders. Was it 26?
Again, it depends on who you ask. That 33 is the number that gets tossed up there a lot, but yeah,
there was a whole bunch of dead young men.
There was a lot of dead young men and boys
and boys in the crawl space, but you don't hear about the house having anything associated. The house was torn down. But the one thing I would say that I thought was interesting as I did my research, and just researching quotes here, this was off Ursula Bielski's site and Wikipedia, but what I thought was interesting, and this is just a theory, we should discuss this, was the amount of lye he used on the bodies to help dissolve them. And would that, I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to do with Gacy continuing to haunt or not, but would the destruction of the body still, even with the horrific context of the person, would something like that whack a haunting? Stop a haunting before it started?
Well, I mean, are you talking about his victims haunting, or are you talking about his...
Well, it could lead to him too, because with so much lie, was it lie or lime or whatever it was?
I can't. I'd have to double check, because I have to say I'm good at remembering my facts. I don't remember if it was lie or if it was lime.
Okay.
And he's seen. Correct me if I'm wrong. When he is seen, he's in his full.
Correct. The clown
suit, which my argument to that is most people who know of John Wayne Gacy know him from the picture of him in his clown outfit.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So one could make the argument that part of the reason why he is seen like that is because that's how people know him. And that's what's already in our brain. But he kept, I mean, they found it was like, I think it was 26 bodies that they found on his property in the crawl space. The fact that he kept the bodies in the crawl space and kept them near suggests to me that being near the bodies meant something to him, which could be why, if we are looking at why he may have stuck around, or his spirit, it could be to, be near his victims that he wanted to be near. I don't know that I've read much about, and now I'm kind of interested, using lime, or the use of quicklime or lye. Can that impact a haunting? That's not something I've ever done any research on.
Yeah. So the one thing that, and Gabi, if you interject whenever you want to.
No, I don't know anything about this. I'm interested. I'm learning from you guys about this lime situation.
What I learned is when they dug up all the bodies on the property, it was like they took off really six feet of soil around the property. I mean, there was a depression where the house was when they were done, and the house did get bulldozed. But you would think, I don't know if does that break the connection to the ground when you do something like that, because they're lifting the soil, and you have to buy into the theory, right? Or hypothesis. It's not even well researched enough for us to have a theory out of it. But, there's a link to bind you to the ground, the soil, the area.
Right.
And let's just say that's not a part of Illinois that's going to have much quartz and limestone and stuff that you hear. Sure. Don't send the shade all you want, people. But when you do that kind of mass dig up, would that stop Gacy from haunting? Because what I read was he actually haunts the courthouse, the Cook County courthouse where he was convicted.
Is he dressed as a clown then too?
Apparently not.
Okay.
That's interesting. I feel like that's worth noting, because that could, my question for that is it residual or is it intelligent? And like, that could be a residual, him just being at the courthouse from his time there. And maybe that affected him a lot. And that's why that's still happening in a loop. Or if it's, intelligent, then that's a whole other situation that makes you question, why is he attached to the courthouse? But I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like even if you bulldoze a house, the energy of whatever happened there is still there. Like, even if you get rid of X amount of soil, like, it's still the same place. And I feel like that kind of energy is going to linger, regardless of it being like a ghost or a residual haunting or whatever it is that you think is there. I think it would still be there personally. If it was there once, I don't think that bulldozing is going to change anything. If anything, it might make things act up more, because construction, we've talked about this before, usually, makes paranormal activity act up versus go away.
Well, and I think Pioneer Square is a prime example of, just because a space has changed doesn't mean some of those spirits have gone away. I think anytime you have an older city too, but especially a city that has an underground like Pioneer Square does. So, I think I agree with Gabi. I question courthouse hauntings in general, unless it comes back to unless it's a residual haunting, where is the particular attachment to this courthouse of all places? Why a courthouse? A jail? Okay, I'll buy a jail a little more. You spend a lot more time there, but the courthouse?
So let's speculate on that. I would say, because this is, he was caught and convicted. It's like bare open wound. It could be the shock of it. Even though when I think about my serial killers and stuff, I think of them as being soulless machines and stuff like that. But still, people, negative emotional impact on it could do the imprint. Or, it's not open for tour, so it's not that side of the house to invent the story. You can't monetize it,
True.
I think you also should consider how many people are in those areas
Mhm.
that can like, not even like the monetizing part, but like how many people are around to experience things. If you're in a public place versus a private place, the private place isn't going to have as many people going through it to be able to experience things, to speak to it, versus a public space. You would have more people talking about it if they're going through it more frequently.
True.
Mm-hmm.
One, and again, for me, it also comes back to a public place like a courthouse. People see apparitions, people see something. How many people go through a courthouse? And again, how many of those people who have gone through this courthouse are notorious serial killers? How much of it is that the haunting actually is him?
Correct.
Versus somebody else.
Yeah.
But because this is the name, attached to the courthouse, this is who we think we're seeing.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, we've got the Herb situation, which I think is the standout one. Because like when I think about serial killers, there's very few that are really like killing in the home. Now, I will say we have our lovely murderesses of the past who like to poison their children and stuff and kill their husbands in their homes. What was interesting is, as I was just going through some of those names, I really didn't get anything about them haunting a location. Still, it was victims.
I mean, I think about, because I had made a list of spirits who off the top of my head I think of or I've heard of, and I do know that like I've heard of Bel Gunnis haunting some places, particularly and this is what I think is weird, is that I've heard her haunting not where she supposedly, because I have doubt that she actually died in that fire at her home, but the graves of her victims, which I find kind of odd.
Yeah.
But a handful that haunted cemeteries as well, which I also found a little bit, again, I come back to, because this person is buried here, a spirit I see is this name that I recognize and not something else. But I'm trying to think of all the ones that I had. H.H. Holmes, Gacy, Dahmer. Oh yeah, Dahmer supposedly haunts his home
next to Shakers in Milwaukee. So I was going to ask about that one because, well, for one thing, it was a rental.
Yes,
it was a rental. And yes, he did murder there and everything. I didn't know. I was going to bring that one up as a possibility, but still, because it's in a 25-year time frame, I wanted to be a little respectful because, there's victims' families out there. Yeah, people remember it very well.
He died in 94.
Yeah, 2 years, I think, after he was caught. It was 92 he was caught, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And he was killed in a correctional facility, actually, where I was a kid. I grew up.
No way.
That area. That prison was built after I had left. But not long after I left, but after I left.
Are you sure? Are you sure you didn't start it yourself? I'm just saying.
But I have heard the home and sorry if that's more than 25 years if we're looking at from when he died, but from when
true.
Done his
murders, you're right. We're on like a 28, close to 30 years now.
Correct. There have been, because there was was an NPR or something piece about it, EVP recordings supposedly that have been. I'll have to find that NPR article.
Are we air quoting EVP?
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Air quote.
Apparently, allegedly.
Well, it was from, and again, this is I need to double check some of my this is from a while ago that I remember reading about this, that it was from a specific owner. So I don't know if he was the only one who's ever reported some of these things, or if there have been others, because if it's just him, ... Anyway.
Yeah, the whole thing is we're not, you're right. We get there's some kind of phenomena that happens.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Put the most well-known name, slap that label on it. Doesn't mean it's really them. I just find it odd with how much, when you think about serial killers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get the victims, the trauma that they got. But you would think someone that liked to terrorize and freak out peeps would stick around and haunt just to, zing the current living. And you don't tend to hear that much about the killers themselves sticking around. So I always wonder, is it because it's just they're soulless? They don't really have the same attachments to our plane, and when their time has come, they just move on. And that's the end of it.
Most of them know their time is coming. And so I feel like if you're looking at it from an unfinished business standpoint, like their victims, they didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to get murdered by a serial killer today. Like this is something they weren't planning. A lot of them were surprised by it. It could have happened very quickly. Whereas most of these killers were executed. Not all of them, but most of them. And so they had time to come to terms with wherever they were going afterwards or whatever was going to happen to them afterwards. And they knew their death was coming, which is also where I look at like Herb, that's an exception. Dahmer would be another exception. He didn't know it was coming.
True.
But you do have a lot of these killers who were executed. So this idea of the unfinished business is not as, if you're looking at that being a cause of potential haunting, they may have been more at peace with themselves and the inevitability about what was going to happen. So maybe it just was, they didn't have any reason to stick around.
I also think if they did stick around, they might not torment just anybody. Because if they were killing a certain type of person, I'm going to use Herb as an example. Herb went after young gay dudes, and he himself was gay. He would pick up guys at like gay bars, and take them home, right? And fool around, have a good time, and then not have a great time, if you know what I mean. Depending on your perspective, I guess. But Herb wasn't known to like haunt in a way that was negative, depending on who was experiencing the haunting. So for example, the people that bought the home, the Graves, their last name is the Graves, they actually like don't have any bad experiences with him. If anything, I guess Herb really loved his home, and because Mr. Grave, I'm blanking on his first name, but because he took care of the home, he like so-called allegedly respects him and doesn't like mess with him. But Brian was the guy who lived upstairs in the extra apartment, which used to be Herb's apartment, and he was a young guy who fit the MO of the people that Herb would go after, and he tormented the crap out of that guy. So I think it just is dependent on who is present to be haunted. If that makes sense. That's an
interesting point.
No, it's like a trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right.
Just an example. Might not always be, the case, but
true. So the next question I have is just dealing with the theory of hauntings and the time it takes for one to start manifesting. So I've heard plenty of tales here from anywhere. It's usually not immediate. If it's immediate, it's like a crisis apparition kind of thing, the full on echo before you move on. So like you're on a 3-day window, right after death. A lot of stuff I've read is it takes 5, 10, 50 years for this to build up and start a haunting. Now, there's a couple of exceptions, like with natural disasters we've heard about in Japan with the tsunami, the town that
so sad.
apparently has hundreds of phantoms from that. But again, that's big disaster, massive surge of negative energy. What's your take on understanding there might be a delay? Which serial killers do you think, if they would come back, who would they be?
That's a really good question.
First, we can start with, do you believe in the 5, 10, 50 year kind of thing?
I mean, again, I feel like you get a little bit into the kind of haunting you're talking about too. Because if you're talking about an intelligent haunting versus a residual haunting, I find, at least I've read a lot of reports specifically with residual hauntings where you're seeing those much earlier than 5, 10, 50 years. Because the nature of a residual haunting is that excess energy, essentially. I don't know. Gabi, do you have...
I mean, it would make sense why everyone thinks that ghosts look Victorian. I'm just saying.
I feel like, but it's more convenient more than anything else to express it that way.
Well, because you never really see anybody dressed in like 80s attire as a ghost, or like, you know, I don't know. It's a stupid joke, but like, there's so many more like hundreds of year old ghosts than there are recent ghosts, but that's like a numbers thing. That's not even like is it because it's been 100 years? It's because there's way more dead people from then than there are from the last 30 years. And that's probably why, because the ratio mathematically makes more sense. I don't know. I feel like that's a circumstantial thing that you can't put a blanket statement over.
I think that's a good way to put it, because I don't know. I think about like Sankai Juku I relate lots of things to Pioneer Square just because I have a lot of firsthand experiences with those.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that haunting because a lot of people outside the area, we're all in Puget Sound. They may not be as familiar with that.
The Sankai Juku, which they still are a dance company from Japan, and they had been performing in Seattle in 1985, I believe.
It was about then, yeah.
Yes, I should, this is how long it's been since I've done a tour that I'm questioning that fact. But to be fair, it's been almost a year since I have done a tour. So a couple of my dates are getting a little... So they were performing the Dance of Life and Death at the Mutual Life building in Pioneer Square. And it involved them lowering themselves via rope over the edge of the building and slowly lowering to the ground. And tragically, one of the ropes broke. And one of the performers fell, a good 5 stories and hit the concrete and died. And his spirit is said to be seen where he was right before he fell on the Mutual Life building in Pioneer Square. Now, to be fair, because he was not declared dead till he got to the hospital. They were in the ambulance. They did CPR. But I don't actually know when the residual hauntings started being reported, but I know when Spooked first started, they would have been established by then.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So, which I suppose that's a good 15 years after. I that would almost be something to look into. When did those reported hauntings start, or when did that residual haunting start? I guess that's almost its own thing. I've not thought as much about when did some of these reports start for some of these spirits.
I think something to consider, to your point, Kim, is who is experiencing the residual hauntings. like what people are, because the other thing to take into consideration is, are these people sensitive? Do they tend to see things that other people might not be open to seeing? And so maybe the prevalence of that amount of people in that area at that time caused that to be seen. I don't know. Like, that's something, I don't know. The reason why I'm thinking this, let me give you some context. So my mom is very sensitive, but doesn't like to admit it. She's someone that will see things out of the corner of her eye. And she constantly sees my grandpa, who has been gone for, I think 10 years now, in her home. He used to live, it was when I used to live with my parents a long time ago, he lived with us for a few years. And up until he went to an old age home, he lived there. And so after he died, my mom started to see him around the house, but it wasn't like an interaction. It was like seeing him sitting on the couch, like he was watching TV, or sitting outside on the patio table, like at the chairs. But it wasn't like intelligent. It was very clearly residual. And it was something that nobody else saw. I wasn't living at home at the time, so I didn't see anything. And I still, to this day, even when I visit the house, I don't see anything. She still sees things. But that was pretty immediate after he died, probably like within a year, like not even 5 years. It's only been 10 now. So like, is that because she's sensitive? Is it because she's his daughter and maybe has his energy and like has a connection to that and nobody else sees it? Like, I think context is important. I don't know.
Well, because I think about how often I've heard stories from people talk about seeing loved ones who recently passed and seeing them. But the difference being, are they seeing them once right after they pass versus continuing to?
Right. No, she was continuing to over years. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I hate to keep coming back to this as a point, but I think of some of the stories I know with historical homes or things where fairly immediately people said they started seeing things. How much of that was actual real paranormal phenomena, and how much of that was, I know some creepy shit went down here. Can I say shit?
That's fine.
Okay. I know some creepy shit went down here. And so consciously or not, something weird happens, and I'm immediately going to say it's because this creepy shit went down in this home and it must be related to that.
Well, then we get down to evidence.
Yes.
Evidence. If you don't know why we're doing that, then go listen to Ghoulish Tendencies.
But like the Lizzie Borden home to me is such a great example of that.
Which we still have to buy, by the way.
Yes.
The Lizzie Borden home, yes. Either there's a cat.
There's Tilly. I see Tilly in the background.
It's like, yes, go buy the Lizzie Borden house.
But we are so susceptible to suggestion as people. And we talk about this again. If you want to listen to Ghoulish Tendencies, we talk a little bit about it with the Enfield haunting case, with the gorilla video, where there's a video, an experiment that they did where they have a group of people like playing basketball.
Yep. Yeah. I know this one.
And the gorilla that walks through the frame, and how many people don't see it because they're so focused on the basketball. In fact, Gabi, you didn't notice the gorilla when I showed the video to you. Yeah.
No, I didn't. Why are you sending me this?
I was counting basketball bounces or passes like you were supposed to.
But that, we have the ability to see what we need or want to see and not see what we should be seeing. And I often, I'm a believer who is highly skeptical, because I think so much of what we experience is our own brain messing with us, or because we really want to believe something, and you can manifest that. I think when you want to believe, but it's so true.
On that point,
talk about this in depth.
Yeah. So I will say I did run an experiment, and I'm changing my approach to ghost hunting. Don't tell a ghost. Because I'm the gadget guy, and I usually don't take the gadgets that will make sure you have a ghost. Okay.
Right.
So I didn't have an SLS out. I didn't have the K2 out or anything.
No spirit boxes.
No spirit boxes, so I went with my Eddie Plus. I didn't use my laser grid, but I put out some of my routine gadgets and my new house because I moved in August, and I'm just like, well, I'll just test
Why
this
not?
stuff. Why not? Let's just and I left shit out all summer.
And
I would get the same results as I would have had in a haunted location. We would have called it haunted. Just because, I live by Rainier. We have swarm quakes, little swarm quakes all the time, which caused the geophone. I can, it's all time stamped. So I can go in and say, okay, on, like September 2nd at this time, oh, there was a swarm quake. I had vibration on my Eddie Plus. There's always temperature anomalies, and there's always going to be EMF anomalies. You could put something out and it'll eventually flicker.
Yeah.
And if you were looking at that through the lens that, yes, this is a haunted place, you would say, ooh, we're getting active, and you'd start doing an EVP. So of course I had my H4n zoom. We're getting nerdy here, people. And
we
passed that away. You should have seen before we started recording.
Oh my
people.
God.
Back to
a different kind of nerd.
back to the gadgets though. And I did EVPs. I had EVPs, but I could time it to my neighbors were outside, or and even though you're not hearing it, you could pick up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go out to document walkingness. I've got the cameras, and I'm just going to focus on getting the wonky. Because
get the wonky.
Get the wonky. Ghost Daddy, getting the wonky.
Oh God, I don't know how I feel about that.
Wait, I've heard of that movie.
Wonky.
Wonky.
Oh, Daddy, it's so wonky.
Anyway, so since my gadgets, I'm just gonna record wonky.
Dirty.
What? How was that dirty? Daddy is just talking about his wonky.
Oh my God.
As you can tell, we's peeps.
But no, that I love that you did that, because
Scully.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's with a place that doesn't have a loaded history.
It ain't got no history.
Well, it's literally everything that you were just saying, Kim, of like, that there's someone there. So you're going to say that someone is the ghost. Yeah. But if you go into a haunted place, it's haunted. You expect a ghost. So you're going to think that a vibration is a ghost. But if you go into a not haunted place and you put up your ghost stuff and see if anything happens, you can debunk it more easily because you don't assume it's a ghost.
Well, again, it's why I can't do most of the ghost hunting shows, because there's never a effort to find a reasonable explanation for something. They automatically
That's aired.
You're right. That's aired. And part of that is ghost hunting shows are not being put on to be actual depictions of what it's like to be in a ghost hunt. They are entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know that though.
Well, and that's
a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a whole other
episode.
Yeah. But no, I think, Jake, that kind of makes the point that if I move into a place that I knew a serial killer lived, or if I was in a place I knew a serial killer had been, and that's in my brain, that's going to be my explanation for things.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's different if you hear something running up to you and then it throws you across the room.
Sure.
you know, and it was invisible, either, you know, you got someone with some new stealth tech on, or like something demonic wants to eat your soul.
You know, at least
I
you
had
had
a nickel.
company.
Yeah,
This is what it's like working with kids.
I know. But guys, back to, you know, serial killers
Serial killer.
and understanding if there is the 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 year thing. Which serial killers do you think would come back?
Well, I think Herb is still here for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
He's one of the only ones that I look at and think could be legit.
Yeah.
Who actually could be the one that they think it is, as it were.
It's because they actually have a lot of evidence for it. Evidence. Yeah, but they have a lot of evidence for him, and there's multiple different people that have similar experiences. So it's not just coming from one source. So I think, especially because it's a more modern one that's happening literally in the last 10 years.
That's a pretty this one is a pretty contemporary case, I gotta say.
If you don't know what we're talking about, it's Fox Hollow Farm.
And I'll drop a link. I'll drop a link because I think you did the murders and you did the hauntings. It was a two-parter, right?
We had a two-parter for that.
So I'll drop links for that, folks.
And I don't know. I feel like Bundy, I would think that he would be in certain places, but I don't know.
I mean, I come back to, for him is but why?
Yeah.
Like he was on death row for 10 years. And it's not to say his spirit in theory haunts the electric chair in Florida. Just
exciting.
Bonkers to me. Of all the places to haunt, that's not the place I'd want to haunt. But what's his unfinished business? Or okay, put that aside. Why is he sticking around?
But then you question, do you need a reason why?
I guess, you know, when you get back to the we don't have an answer to this. Why do ghosts stick around? We have theories, but we don't have an answer. We have hypotheses, but we don't have an answer. But he would be one.
I feel like the reason why I think of him as being someone who would haunt is because he was so into himself, and he liked the fact that he was known. You know what I mean? And so I feel like he would want to stick around to still be known.
So since we're going there, I'll speculate on this one. Was someone in the case of Bundy understanding what he was able to accomplish? Why would you want to come back as a ghost where you couldn't touch or physically harm?
That's what I come back to with him. To me, he wouldn't want to be a ghost because he couldn't do anything.
Yes.
Whereas if he moved on, whatever that means, if it's to nothingness or if it's to something, he's the kind of person that would want to know what that was.
Yeah. So to me, the serial killer I think would come back, and Kim, you'll smile when I say this.
Okay.
I think it would be Fish because he would get off on
He'd get off on
people.
it, yeah.
He would get off on it.
He totally would. Because he was that kind of sicko. No. I think somebody who got off more on torturing people in a very different way. Because you've not had, Albert Fish, man, he was a special kind of deranged and sick and disturbing in a way that Bundy can't aspire to, if for no other reason than he didn't murder and eat children and then write letters to his family about it, you know? No, well, it's funny because I could see somebody like Ramirez maybe a little bit too.
Oh, is that who I meant to say at the beginning? Ramirez? I think that I said Rodriguez.
Yes, Ramirez. Yeah, Ramirez. Who supposedly now haunts the Cecil, which again,
that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing. But I could see somebody like Ramirez also possibly being a little more down to come back and haunt if for no other reason to scare people.
Yeah, I can see that too.
Whereas Bundy, it was never about, it wasn't scaring, it was power. And it was,
that's true.
You would be giving your power away.
He wouldn't have control over a haunting, and that would eat at him because he loved his control over whatever it was. So
man, I don't want to be a ghost.
But I think that's just it. Any serial killer who wanted an element of control about themselves or control about, if their crimes in any way had to do with that, then I can't see them wanting to haunt because that isn't something within their direct control.
Okay. So I also speculate, Gabi, I want you to chime in with some of your other picks too, by the way. I always thought the ones that were really into the mystery would do it. So BTK, am I saying that one?
Of course, he's not
Zodiac.
dead.
He's not dead.
Yeah, he's no, give it time. Give it time. Give it time. Hurry up and die, dude. We need a ghost. And Zodiac, because
he's probably dead.
He's probably dead. I could see them because the whole mystery aspect of it as a ghost, it's the perfect mystery.
Yeah. I mean, there's theories about Ripper haunting some of his spots too. And that's another, the mystery element, certainly.
I think mainly Richard Ramirez is the one. After you guys mentioned, I was like, oh, duh, 100%. That's one I definitely think. Like, did you guys watch the Night Stalker?
Yeah,
it's on now. Yeah,
on Netflix. Yeah. So like they talk a lot about how he just would always put himself in a situation where he would like really terrify someone, and he didn't want to kill someone unless he terrified them first.
Yeah.
And like, it's just wild to see what he did to children and adults alike. That like there was no barrier that he wouldn't cross. So I feel like that would transfer over in death too. Like he would probably just fuck with everyone.
Well, and if you watch last season of American Horror Story,
I never finished it. I
liked it, but Ramirez features prominently in
1984. Yeah,
dead/undead forms.
Yeah. Because it's American Horror Story.
American Horror Story. Yeah.
I do love that it happened in LA in 1985, which is where and when I was born. And I asked my mom about it and she didn't remember anything. And I was like, did you watch the news? Like, how do you not remember? She's like, I was giving birth to you, and tried to like
that whole year.
I just love that I got blamed.
Labor.
I got blamed for like not allowing her to know who Richard Ramirez was, and I wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because when you grow up in areas where they didn't like, okay, so I'm from Wisconsin originally. We've got some serial killers, right? And they all tend to be cannibals.
What does that say about your neck of the woods?
Know. People get sick of corn. I don't know. Dairy.
Limited sources.
Although like, Ed Gein was not actually a cannibal.
No, he was not.
He gets a lot of people think that, particularly to the connection to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He wasn't actually a cannibal.
He was a craftsman.
He was a craftsman. He liked
nipples.
A craftsman.
He worked with his hands.
Yes, he worked with his hands very well. So it's really interesting to hear about these contemporary, like we had Jeffrey Dahmer in Milwaukee.
Right.
Mind you, Jeffrey Dahmer's actually from Ohio. I'm just saying.
Details.
Take some Ohio shade there.
Whatever. Details. But like you've had like take Seattle. I mean, we got some serial killers up here.
There's
okay. And then LA, LA is known, has had quite a few.
Yeah.
As well. And I'm just
California.
like, but I was going to say, like, the killers in my home state didn't have the same kind of menacing aura. Maybe it's because it's a more rural area and you just didn't, the bodies didn't get the same level of coverage.
I think that is fair. I mean, killing in a city versus killing in a rural area is very different.
A camp in New Jersey.
but I mean, killing in a city. Because you look at even just like Summer of Sam, it was Zodiac Killer. There is an idea of creating fear, as you said, and creating panic that exists if you're killing in a more populated area, because it is going to be noticed and get more media attention, versus trying to kind of be on the DL and hide your crime.
Yeah.
I mean, some people just didn't care to hide their crimes, and I think that's like why, you know, you see what you see with people in cities versus people outside of it. Like,
or even like Bundy versus Ridgway. I mean, Bundy was hiding the bodies, but he was targeting women who would be missed, whereas Ridgway was targeting women who would not. And so they were not, nobody put the pattern together for a while until they started finding bodies in the Green River.
Not so green anymore.
But anyway, that's a little bit of a digression. Sorry.
So we've had a few. That's okay.
Life with Kim and Gabi.
Hey, at Ghoulish Tendencies. But guys, I will say thank you for this time. I do appreciate this.
Yeah.
Ghoulish Tendency podcast is available on pretty much every single podcast platform out there, or podcatcher. Do they even use podcatcher anymore? From Apple to Spotify, you know, all the big ones. I will drop links for everyone, especially to the episodes with the killers we have mentioned.
Yeah.
And couple of other ones like the Benders, which I really enjoy because there's nothing like a killer family.
Families that kill together, stay together.
So guys, do you have anything else you're currently working on outside of Ghoulish Tendencies you wanna pitch? Or
I'm currently also editing a podcast called Washed Away, which is dealing with true crime, unsolved crime in the Pacific Northwest. And it's really great. It's done by my friend Ashley, and I'm happy to be helping out.
And for you, Kim?
I have an upcoming Tea and True Crime on February 21st at 4 p.m. You can find tickets at spookedinseattle.com. It will be on the dating game killer.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
This was fun.
I love to talk about killing things. Not in a creepy way, people.
I like to talk about it in a creepy way.
And that's why we get along.
So with that, have a good night.